Whatever you want.
Let's go. I already have a feeling this is going to be a fun episode. So LukaNation, I want to welcome you guys back to another episode of Luka's Tigers and Bronze. And we have a special guest with us. You guys undoubtedly know this man, Patrick Ryan, PRYAN, big personality, a lot of grace. And PRYAN's an entrepreneur. He's an investor, but he's a true hobby ambassador. And I'm excited to spend these next 50 minutes with him. You're someone I admired from afar. So I'm excited to kind of get to know you a little bit better, hear your story in this episode. And without further ado, I think we're going to go all over the place in Cage. This is actually one of those episodes, I unscripted it for a reason. No outline. I just want to get to know PRYAN and hear his take on the current market environment in the hobby. So without further ado, I want to welcome you. Welcome to the show.
Great. Well, thank you guys for having me on. You guys have a very strong following, and as I mentioned, because, as you guys referenced, I do have a day job, and the day job in ticketing is getting very busy. Not to be boastful, I do turn down most of these requests, but due to the fact that you guys are very focused on hobby knowledge and kind of building a community, it was a no-brainer. So I appreciate you guys, carving out a lane for me. I'll jump into the first question about, the current market conditions, right? Look, we've all speculated about what's happened and what's it mean. And it's funny to see people pulling money out of the hobby, because if you really believed in this as a long-term thing, this is some of the best buying opportunities we've seen in the last, quite frankly, year. There is still some stuff popping up. But there's still a lot of stuff that's sliding well below comps. And I'm just excited for the generation of entrepreneurs. Goldberg, you said, this is more or less your full-time thing. I mean, the investments and plays that guys like you make today, it's going to play out if they were smart and deliberate about what they did. So I'm excited about what this dip means, but I'm also, it does hurt a little bit in terms of people losing some energy around it, and then people losing some enthusiasm around it, and the timing with PSA being shut down and retail wax changing its distribution model. There's just a lot of factors that would push people that were in for the I don't even want to say easy money, but the easy adrenaline rush of ripping retail, sending it in the PSA, having it come back at 10, and the ROI just being off the charts, and it being a little bit about the money, but also more about the sense of accomplishment of kind of going through that supply chain and turning $20 into $120. And so I can see there's a lot of lost enthusiasm, but this is just going to shake out the pretenders from the contenders. And so we're seeing a lot of pretenders move on to other things, and that's fine. I just hope that the people that really loved it hang on while we wait for the national, we wait for PSA, and we wait for more clearance and guidance about what's happening with the retail wax.
How long do we have to hang on for?
Boy, I think it's about figuring out your real collecting goals and your real investing goals, because people with long-term investing goals, this might be the busiest time in their hobby lives, quite frankly, because, one thing that we've seen for those of us who have been in this market since, let's just say I was passively in 2013, more active in 2015, and then very active in 2017. In 2015, we saw this big run-up of some vintage stuff in the 50s. And while those prices came back down, what we did see is we saw a new threshold. People are comfortable paying X for Y. And so at the end of the day, we did see the LeBron Topps Chrome get to 41,000, right? Is it going to get back there tomorrow? No. But what it means is that high watermark, what we've seen with cards over the last number of decades, is they do get back to high watermarks, the iconic cards, the blue chip cards. So for those who are kind of waiting, there's probably people who are like, I don't want this dip to end, right? Because it's just such a unique opportunity. I think that, people need to be patient throughout the summer. And then also, again, we talk about a normal life. We're still 6 months away from a new year. And that will be the first full year without any sort of restrictions, more or less. I mean, who knows what's really going to happen. So it's kind of like, look, give the hobby, if you're kind of passively invested in it, something you put 4 to 10 hours a week in, just stay patient until the start of the next year when you're kind of recalibrating all of your sort of annual goals. And if it's something where you say, look, this still means something to me, dive back in. And if it really didn't mean something to you, that's the time to probably bow out.
This is going to be fun. I knew it's going to be fun from the get-go. We recorded our daily episode, today's one for Wednesday. You guys are hearing this on Thursday with Cage just maybe an hour ago. And this is a lot of the topics we talked about. Before we get into them, before I unleash you, Cage, I want to ask you something. You're an investor. I'm curious why people don't look at these times as an opportunity to build an ancillary business that complements the hobby. So like you had a slab shelf, right? Sent to you?
Yeah.
That's a cool business that doesn't rely on the market going up or down. It's a way to display all those slabs. Why not be creative at a time like this so that when the market does bull again, which all markets do, you're prepared and now you're kind of have two horses in the race?
Well, and so I think that oftentimes people, there's sort of multi-levels of within like the concept of investing, right? So some people, it's easy for them to invest in a tangible sort of commodity. It's harder to invest in idea, right? So like there's that delineation right there. I mean, because I've been self-employed and have a company, I'm a co-founder of a company that has 36 employees, and it was just 3 employees for the first 4 years of our business, more or less, maybe first 3 years of our business. I kind of understand patience and the ebbs and flows of things. So I tend to be a little bit more patient of an investor, more or less. But I think that people just have a hard time getting away from the modern shiny card, right? And so the people who diversified away from Prism 6 months ago, they kept Prism. That's fine. I love it. It's great. It is what it is. But started kind of sprinkling other aspects into the hobby, into their own collections. I think they're more open-minded about stuff like, is there a way to partner with Slab Shelf? Is there a way to partner with, Star Stock? Just like the other thing too is there's a lot of arbitrage between marketplaces. There is stuff that sells way better on ComC than eBay. There's a lot of stuff that sells way better on eBay than Star Stock. There's stuff that sells better on Star Stock than StockX, and vice versa. So when people are like kind of complaining about the market going down, it's like you're just a loser because there's still plenty of money to be made. Last night I had a run of auctions end with Probstein. I'd bought a Jacob deGrom Topps Update rookie for $150 about a month and a half ago. Sent it to SGC. It came back at 10 and it sold for $500 last night. Now, to me, that's not about the money. It's more about the fact that there's still flip opportunities, particularly cross-platform. And so it's just people being just so used to the lazy, I'm going to go run and get some retail and flip it for 4X. I'm going to send in some cards, the PSA, and it'll be 10X by the time they come back to me. The people that didn't come into the hobby as grinders, they're the ones that are getting ground down, but there's still plenty of opportunity to invest. The other kind of angle of investing, and this is more broad, not just about cards, is when you're investing, understand if you're investing in an item, commodity, or service versus a platform. And so, my investment in Star Stock is because it's a platform. And when you invest in a platform, oftentimes what it ends up being good at transacting isn't what it started being good at transacting. And so while it's currently a platform for like raw cards, could it develop into something else? Absolutely. It's more about the nuts and bolts and betting on founders. So, as you think about your hobby curation and people being frustrated, study the markets. Don't just go to eBay and look at like recent sales. Like, there's like 8 of my slabs. I mean, the list goes on. And so I just hope people take a step back and realize that during this dip, there's still lots of money being made.
Absolutely. And StarStock is in a lot of ways a data platform. For example, 2 weeks ago, football was trading at about 15% of their sales. This week, it was 20% of their sales. Little things like this, little indicators, they give you a general pulse of the market. Cage, this is people who are listening are questioning, is Cage even in this episode? This is the longest we've had where he hasn't talked. And I want to hear what you have to say. I have a ton of ideas, but I want to hear what you have to say if you have anything.
No, not to besmirch any of our prior guests. We've had many of them. It's, I will talk less when there's real good information coming from the guest. And, this guy, he knows his stuff. So, I have no problem, just sitting back and listening because, look, I'm not calling everybody losers. I'll tell you that much. But I don't want to say that what you're saying is wrong. We literally just did an episode, by the time this airs, it'll be yesterday's episode where Andrew basically said the same thing. I didn't use the word losers, but it was, whining, complaining. And I think really what we're talking about, if we're going to call a spade on this, is a lot of the people who have made money over the last 6 to 12 months were making easy money. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? You take advantage of what's available. You take advantage of that low-hanging fruit. I would say that I did where I could as well, take advantage of some of the low-hanging fruit, right? Why wouldn't you? We're going to lose some of those people if that's if they're one-trick pony. If their only trick was, hitting target, bribing somebody, grabbing that retail blasters of Mosaic and coming home and doing a couple hours of breaks every night. Of just a retail product for 9 times what it was selling for in Target. That's not there, right? And I think the hobby itself should expect to lose those people. I guess my question for you, as somebody who's been in it for a pretty long time, is, when you're investing in a platform, when you're investing in the hobby, when you're investing in from Star Stock to Slab Shelf to Probestein to whoever it may be, right? The more users, the better. Right? The more people in it, the better. Right? So do you view it as a bad thing that we're probably going to siphon off 20, 30% of the users of the hobby? You think it's a good thing in the long term? You think, you wind up with more quality hobby participants? I'd love to, hear what your thought is on that.
Yeah. It's certainly a mixed bag, right? Because the other element to the hobby's growth has been the content. And I touched on this a little bit last week in my IG Live, was like, guys, the reason, we've seen comics are up, many sneakers are up, watches are up, a lot of stuff's up, but it's been a much more steady trajectory. To me, it's been all about the content. Okay. So we have people falling out of the hobby because of the lack of easy flips, right? But then also people falling out of the hobby because it's content that it's not easily curated or created any longer, right? Because it's fun to speculate on like Bol, right? Like I can't, this time last year, or maybe closer to August, whenever the season resumed, Bol was probably mentioned in 1,000 different IG lives and various card podcasts, right?
That's Cage's son's favorite player. Bol had that monster game, he went and looked through all of his raw cards.
I don't think we ever gave Bol as a play, though. I think we kind of shied away from that. No, Ian gave Bol cards to me so I could sell them through Probestein, and he had no idea. That was the only thing we did with Bol.
and Bol is one example. I think it was sort of like there was sort of this energy and
poster child
and fun. Because but here's the truth of the matter. Everybody was chasing Luka. Okay. That's what it was. And quite frankly, I would not be here. I would not have the assets in my collection if it was not for Luka. Right. So when we think about the falling out, the people that got into Luka or Trey, and maybe Donovan, maybe Tatum, maybe Acuna, maybe Soto, but keep in mind, and I've got the receipts of this, from PWCC 2 years ago, I bought a 10-pack of PSA 10 Tatum Prisms for $350 total, not $350 each, okay? I was buying Trae Young raw 2018 Prisms on ComC for $1.25 and then selling them for $25. The people who have raw Lukas at a cost base of $10, raw Trays at a cost base of $2, the people that have those Tatums at 35, I think that they probably have enough equity in their collections that they still really, really enjoy it. Okay. And that they still feel good about what happened during this sort of boom bust, and there will be an inevitable boom. Again, just no one knows when it's going to happen. I'm really concerned about the people who hopped in who never had that big score, and they were chasing Bol and they were chasing Baisley and they were chasing, Austin Meadows. I mean, and they never got that actual kind of real gold rush. They're probably out, but not only they're out, they're also probably down financially. So that to me is a little bit saddening that people actually got hurt by the hobby. And that ties back to the content, right? People were bored. Everybody thought they could start creating content. You can see how much of it's gone now, right? There's, but the ones that are good and they're thriving. And so to that concept, it's just unfortunate, right? But I do think, to answer your question, it is good. I mean, you've got to really clear out the crap out of a market. The bottom feeders, they need to move on to their next thing. We've seen it in ticketing. We've seen it in sneakers. Once it gets hard, once it got hard in ticketing, which was when teams started really getting tighter controls of their inventory and not just letting anybody buy anything. Once that happened, the bottom 25% were out. Once Nike launched the sneakers app and it couldn't be botted, bottom 25% were out. Now you look at PSA shutting down and the retail changing, the bottom 25% are out. And I think that creates, you got to prune a tree for it to grow.
I like that. I came on as my, my Vegas cage personality one day, a couple months ago when the market was still at its peak. And I said, PSA closing and a lot of that stuff, it's going to cut the legs out of the hobby. And sometimes you can over prune, a tree and kill it. Especially when it's being pruned from multiple, angles. I mean, right now we look like a really lopsided bonsai tree in the hobby. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's cool to look at, but sometimes it's just going to be dead. And when you have it coming from both ends, right? My point was, there's a lot of people who have a lot of money. A lot of people have a lot of cars, a lot of assets, right? The people out there with the, with the flossy, Jordan rookies and the LeBron, refractors and, exquisites and whatnot. And what I was saying was, what made those hit the prices they were hitting was because there were people under them trying to be them, right? There were people trying to color up to them. For every person who has, a Luka RPA, there are 10 people below them with Luka blues and blue ice and purple ice and reds. And then there's 100 people below them with Luka silvers and 1,000 people below them with Luka raw. And it's a pyramid, not in a bad way pyramid, but it's a pyramid. And the guys on the bottom want to be the guys on the top. You cut out the whole bottom layer, the prism guys, the base prism guys, when Luka goes from 2,000 to 700, and all of a sudden you realize everybody moves down a layer. You know what I mean? And I don't want to say I'm right, but I'm right. That happened. The people who have the LeBrons and the Jordans and stuff, their cards came down too. Because now you lost those people who are trying to color up to get that card. You lose.
Shouldn't the question be how do we replace that bottom layer? Like that bottom layer gets cut out, and I always bring up the stock market. For example, 90% of traders lose, but they're replaced with new traders. Shouldn't the goal be to replace that bottom?
But how?
Here's the argument. I see your question. The argument is there are so many people who got into it. I sent my first ever grading submission in 2014. Okay. There are so many people from that era. If you go to blowout forums and they're like, why are people grading Topps fucking flagship? Excuse my language, grading base prism, people are like, what are we doing? Like, why is this stuff getting graded? Now, people forget this. That was Mike Trout. It's not even that long ago that the Mike Trout flagship update, the pop report ran from basically 2,000 to 4,000 in one summer. And what happened was the prices kept going up. And so people are like, well, if that can happen to Trout, can't we grade Mookie and grade obviously Aaron Judge and Bellinger? Because, the grandfather to the father to Luke is Aaron Judge ultimately, so maybe it's like Aaron Judge is the grandfather, Luka's the son, and Zion's the grandson, right? But people were like, why would you, basically ripping wax in 2016 and 17 was about building complete sets and maybe landing a parallel of one of the stars or key rookies. It wasn't about I mean, it's crazy thing about 2018 Topps update. When I started opening it, you were setting aside the Acuñas and Sotos and stuff, and Ohtani's, Meadows, all those guys to send to ComC. You were hoping to get a gold, and that's what you would send in to get graded. But then, like, within 6 months, it's like, okay, I'm getting all these guys graded, even if they're 9s, that's okay. So basically, you think about, what really ran up the value and thinking that a base flagship Prism or Topps was like the foundation of the hobby. It's just never been that way, for the mass produced modern stuff. So, that's sort of the big debate. And it's like, I had 200 Luka PSA 10s at one time spread out on my counter. I had 25 silver 10s spread out on my counter. And thankfully, I sold them all in different tranches. I've got Luka sales on the base. I've got Luka sales I probably sold off a chunk of them at $200, sold off a chunk at 500, sold off a huge chunk when it got to 1,000 last year. Probably 100 of them went out the door at that price. And then I kept trickling them out, 1,500, 1,700. And I sold probably 4 or 5 at 2,000. And I'm back, I don't know, I got maybe 10 or 15 of them. I'm fine with that quantity. But like, there's still guys sitting on like 500.
Oh, yeah.
Prism 10s. And that was never the case. The big spender guys, that's not what they would have done. They would have concentrated that into 1 or 2 big cards. So like, it's back to how and why did this chasing quantities of base 10s become a thing? That to me is still kind of almost an unsolved mystery.
Oh, I was going to say, I hope you have a solution. By the way, the first 2 Lukas that I graded myself, I sold for $65 PSA.
Yeah. So it's funny. So April of 2018, right? So was he rookie 18, 19?
Yeah. Yep.
18, 19. Okay. So April of 19, I got back my subs from December when I was ripping tons, and I could go into any Target and just buy it. And I got back all these Luka 10s, and I sent them to Probstein, and I didn't even bother looking. Like, I'm sure these are all $100. The results like $45, $55, and I immediately just started buying everything I could afford. And I kept buying them raw, and because I just like, this is just illogical. And I think about that run up, like, part of me, like, again, I want to be as respectful as I can of various names, and I've kind of changed my tune in general, but like, it really kind of was Gary V.
I was going to say it if you didn't.
If we think about it, because he was at the National well before all these other guys were, okay? And he, dude, I'm telling you, people that get mad at Gary, I get very defensive in Gary's favor, because he told the world to buy the LeBron Chrome at $1,000. He told the entire world. And that's when I went from having one of them to having 3 of them. I didn't have the cash, so I went after the flagship, which went from 300 to whatever it is, right? I had a different angle on that play, but he told people multiple times to buy that. And so that maybe when people saw the LeBron Chrome base, they then just started overlaying that play on
100%. 100% right. 100% right. 100% right.
So let me tell you something. I'm still buying that car. It's funny. I sold it at 7,500. I sold it at 12,000. I'm buying it back at 15 to 20 grand, because again, we saw it have a lot of transactions above 30, right? So to me, 30 is the real floor on that card. It might take 5 months. It might take 5 years to get back there. But the point is that, like, I guess people just they saw what happened. I mean, and Luka went up at the same clip, and so maybe that's just what it was that people realized that base cards could be cool and collectible, and it was fun to build a stack of them. I mean, I guess that's just what it was.
Let's talk about dip buying for a second, because I think a lot of people actually are on the sidelines who want to get back into the hobby. They just don't know the right time, and there's that common, you don't want to catch a falling knife, but like you just presented, you're rebuying LeBron Topps Chrome at 15 because you feel that 30 is the new floor, or should be the floor. How do you recommend people look at that? You have experience. How should people look at a dip buy opportunity?
So the absolute most important question to ask yourself during the dip is like, do I have the time to play the volume game, or do I have the capital to play sort of like the blue chip game? That's the first decision you need to make if you're playing the dip game. And it sounds like, Cage, based on him still having a full-time 8 to 8 and you not, you guys are going to have different, you guys should treat this very differently. Okay. I would say, if you've got like a $10,000 card that you have a buy-in at 2,000 to 3,000, I'd get out of that card now, even if it was at 12 and it's now at 8, and I would take that capital and I would go back in and buy quantities of whatever it is or whoever it is you actually believe in, and then play the sort of take a $10,000 card, bring it down to $100 different cards, and just sell them in different tranches, right? Like, I'm going to sell 2 of them a month until I'm out of them, right? And you can do that over and over. With someone like myself who really can't babysit the market the way I was able to during COVID, it's more like, okay, if I see an auction with Probstein or PWCC or Golden where I have credit, and so, I made a video a couple months ago. I was like, maybe about a month ago, I was like, I'm in the hole with all these marketplaces, right? Like, I owe them all money. I'm now out of that, right? And I owed them money because I was buying stuff, and then I would send them stuff to sell. And I was like, I want to get in the opposite of that position, and I did. And so now it's like, if PWCC or Probstein or Golden, if something I like a LeBron base, Luka silver, Zion silver, stuff that I kind of railed against in the past, I railed against because the way it was being manipulated. But now that it's down and at prices that feel more natural, buy them. And then, like, what I'll wait for is I'll wait for Zion to have 6 back-to-back 40-point games gone, right? Like, that's like my play there. But I'm not waiting for some random market movement. I'm waiting for something that's really going to prompt me to want to cash in. But then also, like, I'm buying old boxing stuff. I'm buying old soccer stuff that, like, I think is cool and is a hole in my collection. And if it goes up in 3 or 4 years, great. But it's just stuff that I know because it hasn't been touched, meaning manipulated more or less. I feel a little bit better sitting on it. Random stuff from the 70s, Hall of Famers from the 80s. And I'm also starting now to get into lower grades. Kobe's flagship PSA 8, it got up to 1,000. It's now around 300. I mean, I don't know why I wouldn't stack those up. Is that not a $500 card at some point in the future? 100%. Of course it is.
Some of those newly graded PSA 8s are very nice looking PSA 8s as well. If you look at some, I was a Kobe collector, so when I first got into the hobby, I went heavy on Zion, then I went heavy in Kobe rookies. So I've graded that card quite a bit. Cage, I want to get into the Jordan.
Sorry, I will say the concept of throttling a pop is very real, right? Like, and they don't really deny that as a card gets more 10s and goes up in value despite the population going up, they definitely just take a sharper eye to the card. That's just the way it is. I mean, it's a lot like autograph authentication. They can look at, I'm trying to think of a good example. Mike Trout might be one. Juan Soto. They can authenticate a Juan Soto autograph in like 3 seconds. A Mickey Mantle comes across the table, that might take 3 minutes, right? So they get a little bit more scrupulous towards the higher end items. That's just sort of what it is.
Are you worried with the Kobe 8s now? I mean, it seems like everybody who submits a sub has a Kobe flagship rookie in it. You're getting a lot of 8s back, a lot of 7s back too. People were hoping to get those 9s and 10s on them, getting a lot of 8s. You worry that pop is still going to keep growing?
So one of my angles is that, like, it becomes a bit of a staple card regardless of condition. I'd say after 8, 9, 10. Like, it's just like, if someone's really building out a curated collection, like I started saying, I started saying this 4 or 5 months ago, that like 10s are for investors, 9s and 8s are for collectors. There, I think we might see some growth of collectors being like, and then of course what'll happen is the 10s will come back down to a reasonable level and there'll just be this ebb and flow. I mean, look, at the end of the day, nice 8s look nice. I mean, it is what it is. And I will say one of my angles, and look, people, please be careful with this information. Like, this is what I do. It's comfortable for me, but there are 8s that I'm buying that I'm going to resubmit at some point whenever, if it might not be for 2 years, but at some point the window at PSA will open to where you can send in regrade requests at a reasonable price, at a reasonable turn, because I just saw a lot of good cards. Like I'm thinking, what were some example? I mean, there were about 10 cards I got back out of Expresses, like the $60 level that I sent in direct myself. Like literally, they just felt undergraded for any number of reasons. And there's plenty of times I've cracked stuff and sent it back in. You know, there's plenty of times I've sent stuff back in the holder. I said, I just think, you know, I'm not saying I'm smarter than the graders, but I've seen a lot of cards, you know, and I've gotten it bumped. So think about the inherent margin of getting an 8 bump to a 9, right? Plus the natural appreciation that I think is there. You know, so that's an angle. Is I think that stuff that's freshly coming back at 8s, if it starts getting pressed down, I'll probably just buy the ones that look good. I'll probably just keep buying them.
I like it. I like it, especially given the fact that I think 8s are much nicer now than they were.
Well, right. That's the point. Yeah.
Well, and I've submitted like just Kobe rookies, and we'll get to the Jordan sale. There was just not a long time ago where people said the Fleer Jordan PSA 8, who wants that? And then it shot through the roof. I was holding that card. I actually remember that. So it wasn't too long ago. Let's talk about Cage. Should we talk about the Jordan sale and talk? Because you brought up price manipulation. I wanted to ask, how can someone who's getting into the hobby notice or spot price manipulation before it happens, or as it's happening maybe?
New to the hobby, I mean, you're the one who's going to get manipulated. But I mean, the truth of the matter is this: is what we saw, in my opinion, and this is based strictly on DMs, is that we had people who lost either $300,000 or $300. Like they either lost 300 total or 300,000 in value. And it was because they were buying into the run up of all the cards that we saw, like the Mbappe silvers, of which I had, you know, it's not my business. I didn't have to do this, but I was the one who sold. The first time one ever sold for more than $1,000 went for $4,000. And it was mine. And I went out of my way to tell, because immediately Sports Card Investor, the slab stocks guys, and the order was canceled within 12 hours of the sale. And I told all these guys, here's what I think. I think it got run up because the people that aren't paying, they've got a bunch of other Mbappes in the hopper. And no one they were willing to talk about the sale not being paid for. They weren't willing to talk about the motivations as of to why someone would do that, right? So there's still going to be that issue. I think that in terms of protecting yourself, you know, at the end of the day, it's research. And I talked about this on my IG Live with the guys from the prop store about, you know, I'm like, okay, I want to get into props because I just think it's like movies are culturally just as significant as sports, you know, and to some people they're way more significant. So it feels like a market that if it's not at least going to look cool on my shelf, there is some potential for it to go up. And we were talking about some of these concepts. And when I went to the National in 2013, there were 2 things that I started buying. The first was signed rookie cards, like a Wade Boggs 83 tops, Barry Larkin 87 tops, Jose Canseco signed 86 Donruss. Because as a kid, you would never get rookie cards signed because it would decrease the value. But now, if it wasn't an 8, 9, or 10, get it signed, right? Like it's $1 card more or less. So I was like, this is really cool. This is a great way. I didn't feel comfortable buying a Wade Boggs PSA 10 at the time. It was probably $250, which is sort of funny to think about, or maybe $200. But I felt comfortable buying a signed low grade version for $70. So I bought a bunch of that sort of stuff. The other thing I bought was Team USA Bowman Chrome Baseball. Alex Bregman, Corey Seager, Chris Bryant was in some Panini sets. You know, basically I was like, well, these cards are like years older, you know, than their first minor league Bowman Chromes. This just doesn't make sense. These things have to go up. I mean, if a 2016 Bregman tops a Bowman Chrome is selling for $400, well, what about the one that came out in 2010 when he was 15 years old, right? Like that's got to be worth way more. Well, you know what? I hadn't done my research. I didn't really understand the market, and I got smoked on all that stuff, right? And so it's like going in with the attitude of buying to sort of find an angle. And if you're new, that's not going to work, right? If you're going in and buying something that just catches your eye and you think that that's just inherently a cool thing, that's probably the best way to avoid manipulation, because not every people's tastes aren't that differentiated. Like there's a top 40 pop chart for music because it's popular. Like it just is, right? Like, I mean, yeah, there could be some nuances and niches, but like at the end of the day, if you like something, someone else is going to like it. If you like something because you think there could be money made in it and you don't know that space, good luck.
What's your take on grading companies? So on the whole, everything that's going on in the grading company space, I find it fascinating. We've seen the biggest grading boom in the history of sports cards, and the two biggest companies during that time say, we don't want any more of your money. We're closing shop. It's a topic that I hope they teach in MBA courses everywhere because it's fascinating. What's your take on it, PRYAN?
Well, I think it's a lot of times the concept of not understanding like the peak because you're so ingrained in it, right? Like, because like I said, people are like, what are y'all doing sending in Aaron Judge flagships to get graded? Like people on message boards are like, that's the stupidest thing we've ever heard of. Why are people buying this stuff? I think the executives at PSA and Beckett probably had a similar thought process. It's like, we've never seen stuff like this before. It's probably not going to last. Who knows what these people are thinking? So they never viewed it as an excuse or a reason to scale. They viewed it as just another fad kind of hitting the hobby. And that was because they didn't really have real market research. They didn't listen to Gary Vee when he said, the sneaker kids are going to get into this, and what people didn't realize, the sneaker kids are all about authentication, right? So they were going to immediately gravitate towards slabbed cards immediately. And then once they learned the slab card game, then they would learn the raw card game, right? But these executives, they just didn't listen to who was really going to be next into driving the surge in the hobby. And then the other thing, so you had the sneaker kids coming in. We also had people like my age, let's just say 35 to 45. When we were kids, everyone was terrified of buying vintage cards because there were just so many reprints. If you went to a card show in 1991, 75% of the 1950 stuff was just flat out fake. So again, my generation was going to default to a graded card. So the PSA and Beckett executives, they just completely whiffed on the value of authentication to the sneaker kids and to people like myself who lived through that horrific era. I remember I was backstage at a TriStar show sitting with Andre Dawson, who was signing autographs. And he was like, yeah, I'm hearing the cards are all getting hot again. And I was like, yeah, man, it's pretty crazy. And he's like, yeah, I got into it. When one of my financial advisors told me to get into it, he's like, every single Mickey Mantle I bought turned out to be fake. I mean, and there's lots of stories like that. And so it was just bad market research. It was looking, people that talk about data. It's like the roulette wheel. Like they put up the past results and it's like, oh my goodness, it's black 7 times in a row. I'm going to run across the casino floor and put money on red. Like that's not the way it works. Like that data of it coming up black 6 times in a row, it's to let you know that that's possible. It's not to tell you what's going to happen next. And that's the biggest problem between data and analytics, because all these clowns that still throw up chart after chart, they're talking about data and they're not giving any real analysis about it. They're saying this card looks like this, and then maybe this card could do this, but no analysis of what that card's price actually means or did, because guess what? They don't actually know. They just don't actually know. And so, kind of tying it back together, I think that people just, trust their own gut and understand that publicly traded companies can be wrong. Companies that have been around for 20 years can be wrong. And I think that's what we saw with PSA and Beckett. I'm very thankful that Nat Turner got his hands on PSA when he did, but I wish he would have done it 2 years ago. because it is a real mess. There's no denying it. It's a real mess.
I mean, Nat Turner came in, and they shut the doors. Should we really all be so thankful and excited that he took over?
No, but here's the thing: is that he didn't make that decision. Steve Sloan did, and I think that because basically, I think Steve, who's in the weeds of that business, probably had said that for a number of months. It took new ownership to listen and say, okay, we can do this. And look, man, I'm getting back almost like every 3 days. I'm getting back subs from PC Sports Cards, and those subs were spaced out by 2 weeks. So I'm now getting them back, like rather than getting one back every 2 weeks, I'm getting back 2 a week. So I mean, they had to get rid of the backlog before they could figure it out. And I think that during this backlog, they've gotten through stuff because they haven't been on the receiving dock entering stuff. They can get through it, but they're also training to be able to handle the next wave. So
yeah, let's hope they open up before there's nobody left to grade.
I mean, like, look, so I mean, I bet that there's going to be something, right? It's not. That's why I'm on Star Stock, and I'm like buying Casey Mize rookies for 50 cents and like Joe Adele for $2. I mean,
we talked about that. We talked about that on our last Star Stock episode. We did Joe Adele's less than $2. Casey
and
Mize,
like
the last one I bought was 43 cents or 45 cents. I was like, come on, what are you doing?
I bought a lot of Casey Mize, 100 of them for maybe, I don't know, it was something like, it was 50, I don't know, $40, right?
Yeah.
And a year ago, a lot of 100 flagship for almost anybody was like $3 to $10 a card, because the implications, you just need 3 of them to 10.
That's right.
You're at a break even. And so to me, that's the other thing is like, man, I don't know. I probably need to go buy more before people see this and realize just how stupid it is that there's people liquidating really good rookies on Star Stock at 50 cents to $1.50.
Yep. Yeah. Joe Adele cards, $1 and change. It's crazy.
Oh, and by the way, to my point about different marketplaces, like there was a day I was buying Joe Adele for $1 on Star Stock and selling him for $3 on ComC.
Yeah. No, there is an arbitrage opportunity there. You know what the thing is, though? That's work. That's harder to do than going to Target and flipping your retail.
Oh yeah. Well, it's more work in terms of like having the savvy to do it. But like, what was nice is that I opened up a bunch of 2021 tops. And I sent it all to ComC. I didn't send it to Star Stock because I took 5 seconds to look at the market. That to me is the funniest thing. So even though I'm an investor in Star Stock, I'm like, everyone just unilaterally sent it there because they had no ingestion fee for a period of time. It's just, sometimes people are just so stupid. But
well, we talk about that a lot with on our Star Stock episode. We say you don't have to choose one platform for you, but there's a lot of platforms out there that you could just sign up, create an account. You don't have to even deposit, but you should just play around with them, because whether they're going to be around in a year or not, something like it will, and you're going to have the upper hand just by that little thing. Yeah. I want to ask you, I know we have a hard stop, so 4 minutes here. Nationals coming up. If you had like that magic 8-ball, what do you think the vibe's going to be like at National?
Well, I think that first off the bat, I think a lot of people, myself included, just assumed that it would like sell out immediately. And I don't even know if it's sold out yet, right? I haven't looked at, because again, I'm friends with like 30 different guys that all have tables and represent players, so I always just kind of figure it out, right? So like I'm not on top of the market. But like I think the fact that it wasn't like their site crashed with people trying to buy tickets, like did it crash? I don't think it did. Like that's a little concerning, right? Because everyone was like, we haven't had a national in 2 years. The hobby's 4 times bigger than it was. I'm sure everyone's going to be flooding there. But I look at it from a couple angles. Firstly, that's still a critical time for people to be traveling. And, in Chicago that same weekend is Lollapalooza. So keep in mind, a lot of the people driving volume in this hobby are, 23 to 30-year-old guys who are like, I haven't been to a music festival in like 2 years. So like, maybe I'll go to the Dallas card show 2 weeks before the National. Then I'll go to Lollapalooza and maybe I'll swing by the National if I'm standing up still. So I think that it's the timing of it for that demographic is interesting. But then also I do think that people are, my opinion, I go to the National to win auctions. Like that's where I bought my Game Used Jordan jersey. I bought my game used Favre jersey. I mean, there's a handful of stuff that I bought that was like exclusive 101s in golden auctions. I wasn't going around the tables buying up, base Lukas and stuff, because it's like there's like platforms for that. Like, you know what I mean? And so I think other people are like, well, the Dallas card shows convenient to them, or the Miami card shows convenient to them. It might be more fun for them, might be more affordable for them. And then likewise, they believe in the internet. So, I think the mood might be a little bit surprising, because what we might see is there being less of like a hustle and bustle at the National than what we might have expected 6 months ago. But I think that we're going to see people making plays. And I think all we've realized, all it takes is like one guy with deep pockets to make a play on a player, and it does shift. So it'll be fun to follow digitally and what's happening on the floor.
This has been a blast.
So I did promise you guys one thing. And I'll show it before because your namesake of your podcast. So here's a picture of Luka Doncic. He scored 46 points this game, or 44 points against the Blazers. And the reason I'm showing that picture is because this is that jersey.
Let's go.
And so, I just like to remind people that, I basically took a PSA 9 blue prism plus a silver prism plus, let's just say, 4 base prisms and turned it into this. What's better? I mean, a blue 9 and a silver and a couple bases, or a 1 of 1. Oh, and guess what? What if I chop this up? I could make a card. I could make a card. I could make another card, right? I mean, it's just off the charts.
With that, right? You can make a logo man where there was.
I can make my own logo man.
There's big business in switching fabric in cards now, so hang on to that.
And so I just ask people to just keep an open mind about stuff. Don't get too nervous, and just be thankful. What I'll close with is, we're talking about the dip. It's still liquid. That to me is like the signs of health, because like when we've seen dips before, like if a player would get cold before, it sat. Like it didn't matter. Now, if a player gets cold, there's enough people that are saying, if it gets down to that, I'm going to buy. So stuff's still way more liquid than it's ever been. So to me, that gives me a lot of hope for the future for the hobby.
This has been a blast.
Listen,
we're gonna wrap here.
I got when we told people PRYAN was gonna be on, what they said to me was challenge him to a burger eating competition at the National. The two of you guys, you could do some damage at McDonald's. And I'm like, all right, I don't want to ask him that, but we could do that if we run into each other.
I don't know if I'll be there. I'll be there for at least a day.
It's funny, right? We don't know whether we're going to go there either. And a lot of what you just said is very true. A lot of what you said is very, very true, right? It's an odd thing, because if you said 6 months ago, basically everybody would want to be there, and you expect it to be just really hopping, And I don't know.
I'll be there I'll probably be there Friday. I'll let people know. We'll try to figure something out. But gotta hop on to another call, gents. I appreciate it, and just let me know what you need to do.
Guys, thank you. We kept it mainstream. PRYAN, someone will have back on. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.